Hi guys, it's Mark Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Mark Zicree of Space Command. And today we are going to be doing something really fun. There's so much going on, my God. The new book comes out next month, Greenlighting Yourself. That we're shooting Space Command. We're about to ship the Blu-rays and DVDs. This is the proof copy. But there it is. Look at that. It will be shipping out in the next few weeks. We are finishing the final little bits of sound mixing and tweaking and color correction. First 2 hours of Space Command. And now we're shooting hour 6. And it's been going terrific. And we're about to go to a really cool place to shoot a really cool scene, which I will be posting about and telling you about soon. If any of you have been checking out my Twitter feed or my Facebook posts, you'll see what this location is. It's an archaeological dig on another planet, Altair 4 specifically, and those of you who are real science fiction geeks will know what that references. But today I wanted to talk about how I put together a set. Specifically, the most recent set we shot on, which was the Departure Lounge for Interplanetary Space Lines. And many of you thinking, well, how does it work when a showrunner approves a set or has a set put together? Well, probably he's the showrunner, so the art director brings him sketches, he approves them, and then on the day he shows up and there's the set all ready and waiting. Well, that's how it might work at the studios. And in the past, I've certainly been in part of that process, but that's not how we do it at Space Command, because as you know, Space Command has a different way of doing things, because we're trying to fight above our weight class and deliver something that's of a quality far beyond what it costs. Now, and so I'm going to go into the specifics of how I put together a scene and a set for that scene. And I'll read you a quote from Guillermo del Toro that appears on the box of the Space Command Redemption Blu-ray. Mark Zicree keeps the indie sci-fi beacon shining, a true believer in self-reliance and ingenuity above budget. Absolutely. And this will be how I tell you how I do what I do. Because in Greenlighting Yourself, I talk about the two things you need to succeed in this industry, and probably in any industry, are humility and confidence. Humility allows you to learn, and confidence allows you to get to where you're going. So I wrote the script for Space Command Forgiveness a while ago. Elaine and I did a pass on it, and now we're directing. We have one more scene for what we call the framing story, and then the haunted house, which is on the alien spaceship we've been building. And so let me walk you through all of this. It's really, I find it very interesting myself. So needless to say, I don't just have the art director come and tell me what he's going to build and then off we go. Now, in some cases, we actually do build our Space Command sets from scratch, like the Paladin Bridge, which my brother Jim assembled from concept sketches by Carlos Fernandez, our production designer on Space Command Redemption, and the mining set and the alien spaceship in Redemption, all those things, it was from scratch. And it tends to be very expensive that way because, for obvious reasons, but I've also been keeping an eye out for things that we could utilize in our show. And just like I read the Making of Star Trek when I was a kid. There it is, the single most influential book in my life, and that's the copy signed by Gene Roddenberry. And one of the things they did in the original Star Trek was, for their major props like the phaser and the communicator, they built those from scratch. But for, like Dr. McCoy's medical devices, many of those were salt shakers, and the implements, the dining implements on the Enterprise, those they didn't make out of whole cloth or metal. They found a futuristic style they liked, and they just bought those. So I knew that there was a way of putting all this stuff together where you could be inventive. Now, one thing that Elaine always keeps me focused on in any scene, in any episode, is that the characters have to work, the story has to work, and there has to be an emotional meaning, a profound emotional meaning, and a truth. So that's always going to take center stage, because if you don't have a meaningful story, if you don't have characters you care about, what's the point? But then in the background, because I'm Mr. Sci-Fi and am plugged into the history of science fiction in detail, I always like to have little references, and of course, to science fiction TV shows, movies, books that have gone before, and because I have a degree in painting, sculpture, and graphic arts from UCLA, because I was a visual artist when I was a kid, that stuff is of great appeal to me. I've always been fascinated by production design in science fiction movies and visual effects and all that stuff. So, and science fiction illustration, of course. So, let's take it a piece at a time. So the scene we shot was a flashback scene where Lynn O'Dara and is in a hospital, and she's remembering these events that have traumatized her from the past. And it's 90 years after the chronology and redemption, so Vaughn O'Dara, Mira Furlan's character, is very long-lived, and so she, is married to Lynn, but they've gone missing for 2 years, and there's a big mystery as to what happened to them, and she's in the hospital, and she's paralyzed, and she's having these traumatic memory flashes. And Captain Jack Kemmer, Ethan McDowell's great-grandson, is Captain Matt Kemmer, played by Aaron Gaffey, who won the talent search along with Ethan, along with Brian McClure, way back at the beginning of this whole process. So we have a flashback where Lynn is going off to join Dr. Vaughn O'Dara on an archaeological dig on Altair 4. And it's a flashback scene 2 years earlier, before she went missing, when Matt is saying goodbye to her, giving her a bon voyage. And it's kind of bittersweet and wistful and touching. So it's these two characters, the primary focus of the scene, but it's at a departure lounge on a space station.
I remember a night back at the academy when you and I were in Ida.
So I knew for a long time that I would be doing this scene, and I was very interested in visualizing what it would look like and how it would work. Now also, we're shooting this stuff at a Space Command Studios in Pico Rivera, because I wrote for Deep Space Nine, I wrote for Babylon 5, and particularly with Babylon 5, they got a warehouse, and they transformed it into a studio, and that's what we've done with Space Command as well. And so as with Star Trek, as with every TV show, you have your standing sets and you redress them. That means you redecorate them, you repurpose them, you make them look as different as possible one to the other, so that you don't look like you're always shooting in the exact same setting. So a couple weeks previously, we had shot a scene in the hospital cafe on a space station orbiting Jupiter. And this was a flashback to a departure lounge for interplanetary space lines on a different space station orbiting Earth. So first of all, we changed the windows so that they're of a different configuration. We were going to use the same basic space, but I said, okay, we're going to change the orientation of it. So we're going to have an arrival gate and a departure gate, and in between the two of those, there'll be a ticket counter, and then above that will be a big video screen showing a commercial for interplanetary space lines, and then there'll be a place by the window where Matt and Lynn are sitting, and there'll be other passengers and so forth going back and forth, and there'll be a sort of a hubbub of activity, but not to a point where it will distract from what they're saying. And I knew there'd be several chairs. I knew there'd be like little end tables. I knew I wanted commercials for interplanetary space lines, and I knew I wanted travel posters. So I started getting things together. And I also knew that the extras in the background, it would be really fun to have various characters in costumes referencing other science fiction movies. And so I started gathering authentic, original costumes from various science fiction films and TV shows. And whenever this stuff pops up on eBay or there's an auction, I gather that stuff because I know I'll be using it. But there's the questions of, well, it's not a zero-G, it's not a vacuum environment, so that we don't have people walking back and forth in spacesuits, except Dave Edison. We gave him a cameo, our wonderful editor, and so he's in a spacesuit that we just kind of grabbed from upstairs in our studio, and then had him carrying a little Tomorrowland space helmet. And at the end of the scene, Catherine McEwen, who's playing Lynn O'Dara, her spaceship is ready and she's boarding, and I knew that I wanted each person boarding to have a Multipass, which was, of course, used in Fifth Element. Okay, so you might say, well, how do you put together a Multipass? Well, you go on eBay, and they put out fan copies of the Multipass, but of course it had the same graphic and the same photo as in Fifth Element. So I want something different, and I want to make these individual. So I make one for Catherine McEwen's character, for Lynn O'Dara. I make one for Dave Edison's character, and I give him the name Murray Leinster because Murray Leinster was a famous science fiction writer of the 50s and 60s. And then with my Bob Heinlein, when I do this, and I don't just just want it to be flat. So I take like old greeting cards and I cut them up for this shiny kind of paper that reflects a little. And then Elaine had old costume jewelry, and I just, put that on so that as you flash it, it's got a little bit of texture and depth and so forth. But each one is handmade, each one is different. And I knew I would be having a cameo, so that's Captain Bob Heinlein, after Robert A. Heinlein, the great writer of science fiction. You can see his book, Farmer in the Sky, back there. That was my first favorite book when I was 7. And I had a cameo in the previous 2-hour story of Space Command. That was the grizzled space jockey, the one who says, wow, when the ship crash lands in the spacesuit that my mom gave me when I was 12. And I wrote a story about that character called Grizzled Space Jockey, which you can actually check out here at Mr. Sci-Fi. But I referenced the fact that he gets cloned. And so when I worked out this, if you look closely, you can see it says Multipass, Captain Bob Heinlein, clone 3rd generation, pilot 1st class, 30 system certification, ESPA rating 87.5. And I'm wearing the style of glasses that were worn by Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2, and I'm wearing costumes from the wonderful TV show Space Patrol. That's a huge inspiration on Space Command. So how do I go about pulling this all together? Now, so I know I have the studio, I know we're gonna have the walls, I know I have a team to paint the walls, to do prep, but you wanna have it look visually interesting and cool. And you want it to be as inexpensive as possible without looking cheap, so that you can get the most bang for your buck. And by the way, in Space Command, there are certain things where you really do put the money in, like big visual effects sequences and so forth, but other things that are less vital. And so, again, you call your shots. So let's talk about the commercials for interplanetary space lines. So this is 90 years after the first story. We jump back and forth. And so they have faster than light drive. So the commercials are not just for trips to planets in our solar system, but planets elsewhere. Jeffrey Hayes, the brilliant cover artist on Space Command, who's done stuff like this, I contacted Jeff, and he's in Texas. He's an incredible artist. And I asked him to design a logo and travel posters for interplanetary space lines. And he loves that assignment. He just turns in a whole bunch of great signage, that travel poster size and also wall sized. And the logo, he generates these things incredibly quickly. They're all original. All Space Command is the first time anybody has ever seen them. And they're gorgeous. And the interplanetary space lines, he gives me several choices of possible logos. I choose one. And so I know we've got our signage. Now also, Stan Rutledge is a wonderful guy who's been a great friend to Space Command, and he has provided free of charge printed posters and a booth at Comic-Con, which he loaned to us, which was just spectacular. So I'm thinking about all this stuff, and I'm aware of all this stuff. Now, Dave Edison, I know, will be doing the commercials for interplanetary space lines, and I want 3 different ones. One for each side table, and one for the big screen over the ticketing booth. I don't want to spend a fortune on the visual effects for that, because that's not where to put the money, because that's just going to be something that goes by in a blink of an eye. So I subscribe to something called Storyblocks that has stock footage that you can utilize. So I have Dave go through there, pull up a lot of visual effects shots that would be appropriate to this commercial. I have Jeff send him the logo of Interplanetary Spaceline so he can drop it into the commercials. So that all is getting going, and I'm approving that as it goes on. And then we put out the word. Some people have perks from our Kickstarter campaigns where they get to be extras on Space Command. So we put out the summons to them. So one of them, in fact, flies in from Ireland for this shoot. Very fun. But I know that we're going to be shooting this scene, so I sort of start accruing materials long in advance. And we know that Captain Matt Kemmer is going to be wearing his Space Command uniform, and we know that Lynn is going to be wearing sort of the outfit that she's going to, go off into space wearing, archaeological dig kind of clothing. So in terms of the arrival and the departure lounge, we can build those, doorways, and then I tell the team to put LED lighting strips around the doorways, those 2 doorways that flash red when they're not, departing or arriving, and green when they're boarding and people are coming out as well. So that works very well as a visual that's kind of interesting, and it also dresses that doorway. Beyond the doorway, we agree that there are going to be 2 ramps that head off at an angle so people can kind of walk down them and, be gone or arriving or so forth. But I want something to dress the farther back, the throw, where you'll see it just in the distance. And we've got tons of stuff from different spaceships that we've built. But also, I found an airlock door that's basically a door-sized decal. It's an airlock door. So I buy 2 of those, put them in the background so that we can see there's an airlock. But you barely glimpse it, but it's just perfect. So meantime, for the ticketing desk in the ticketing area, I remember the booth that Stan gave us, which is made of all these interesting metal piping kind of pieces. So I contact Stan and I say, can we borrow that again? And he says, sure. And I buy a big television set for the big monitor over the ticketing booth. But I know that the two end tables, I want to have ads going for interplanetary space lines and video screens on those end tables, just like at a airport nowadays. You'll see these little advertising screens, in the seating area. So now in my neighborhood, I live in West Hollywood, and I live in an area where people often get new furniture and get new things, and when they get new things, rather than just trashing the old stuff, they put it on the sidewalk and people can take it away. It's just code. We know that it's like, take this away. And I've gotten TV sets from that. I've gotten furniture, but I also want to get furniture that matches. So one person a while ago got rid of 3 white leather chairs. White is going to be the motif for the furniture in this departure lounge. Then later, like a long time later, someone throws out another one of those chairs and it matches. Then someone throws out, it's kind of an Art Deco M table with a hole cut in it. I think that can be where the video screen goes. And then sometime later, another person throws out an identical table. So we've got our 2 tables. And then someone else throws out a little white triangular table that has that science fiction look that matches everything else. So now I've got my furnishings. So good. And we know that we're going to extend the space station by utilizing the same space again further down and have people walking back and forth, and we'll extend out that way. So we have our extras walking back and forth, and we're going to populate it that way. So in terms of the 2 screens on the side tables, I've been doing a lot of experimentation with various things, and I found that video frames were great for smaller video screens. And so I get 2 of the right size. My team pops them into the tables, and they're running these commercials, and it looks great. So now I know that ticketing counter has all this piping now and the big screen, and then just beyond it is one of those wall-sized graphics that says interplanetary space lines. But it needs the ticketing counter itself. So a few days before we're shooting, across the street from me, someone throws out a big old Sony Trinitron television. These things weigh like 300 pounds. And the matching Trinitron stand, which is made of metal and wood and is all silver. And it's perfect. So I bring it to my team, and it becomes the ticketing counter along with that Base Command booth, and it all matches perfectly. But then I'm thinking, okay, it's interplanetary space lines, and I know we're going to have someone behind the ticketing booth, and we're going to have someone looking at the multipasses as the passengers board, and I knew I wanted to play Captain Space Lines, and so I'm thinking, okay, it should be a matching outfits, but I don't want to make the matching outfits because, again, we don't have anything ready-made that way. There's not a Space Command uniform, and that won't work. It has to be something different that'll work. So now, sometime before, I was at a toy collector's show, and I ran into a fellow who had a bunch of stuff from the original Space Patrol TV show that ran from 1950 to 1955, live TV, and it was a spectacular show, wonderful cast, wonderful ambitions, and I actually had lunch with Ed Kemmer, who played Captain Buzz Corey, and our Captain Kemmers are named after him, and this guy, I bought from him a number of items from the original Space Patrol, including some costumes that were worn on the show and also used for personal appearance tours, and they weren't like Captain Corey's uniform, but it was things, there was one shirt that was tan and it had Space Patrol on the arm, and it looked great, and it had this cool belt and these pants with a red stripe, and then there was another thing that was smaller that was also red and tan and said Space Patrol on it, and they weren't the same, but they were close enough to match. And so Phoebe, who's our costumer, agreed to play the ticketing girl and also the one at the departure gate, and I would be the captain. And also, this guy sold me a captain's cap from Space Patrol that had been screen used and also used in personal appearance tours, and it was like an airline captain's hat, tan, to match the shirt, with a genuine Space Patrol badge on the front. These pieces were like 70 years old, but they were in perfect condition. And then so I got these cool black boots off eBay, and I bought them to put on the mannequin with the Space Patrol uniform, and I didn't even check to see if they fit me, but they fit perfectly. So I put those on, and the pants had too narrow a waist for me, because apparently Ed Kemmer or whomever who wore it was like, muscular, but like really thin. So So Phoebe was able to wear those pants, and I recently bought a duplicate costume from Forbidden Planet, and I wore those pants, and I wore a belt from Forbidden Planet, and it all came together. And then for the passengers, as I mentioned, Dave played an astronaut, and then I put someone else in the top from Forbidden Planet because I knew the fans would recognize that. And I had bought a great shirt from Fifth Element, so I put one of our investors in that. And then I also had 2 jackets from Starship Troopers that were screen used. It was just absolutely wonderful. It was magical because you're creating a universe, and everyone's on the same page because we all know that it's a tip of the hat to 1950s science fiction while still being something looking forward and commenting on our life and our world. And then later in that day, we shot a scene on a spaceship that finds Lynn's escape pod floating in space, and I knew I wanted to use Massimiliano Trevis and Andrea Miraglia, who's our DP and line producer, and they speak Italian, they're Sicilian, so I wanted to have them speaking Sicilian to each other in this spaceship, and I bought a little video frame to work as a monitor in that ship console, and the console was from Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes that you barely see in that movie, and so I put the 2 of them in costumes, just threw stuff together, and it all worked. And so I always have my radar out for fun stuff, fun ways to bring maximum enjoyment to our audience and maximum fun and commitment with what we're doing. So that's the basics of how I do what I do, or at least in this case, how I did it. And now we move to editing, and we start putting that scene together and all the other scenes we've been shooting. So it's a blessing, but fortunately, Elaine and I share the same sense of adventure, and I have a lot of people who are willing to play, and I'm just thrilled to be doing all of these things. You know, it's a dream come true, and you know, I'm very open to suggestions. So, for instance, I was talking to one of our investors the other day, and he said, "Well, why hasn't Robbie the Robot appeared in Space Command?" And interestingly enough, one of my friends from high school, Fred Barton, when I was in high school, he made an absolutely gorgeous copy of Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. And so I'm going to reach out to him and see if we can use, he still does that now, all these years later. And I'm going to see if he can let us use Robbie. And so I'm going to have a scene at a bar where Robbie's going to be talking to this investor, and I'm going to put him in a science fiction, in a spacesuit, obviously. And it's going to be great fun. So that's it for now. So if you want to buy Space Command shares, they're $7,500 each. You get a portion of my producer's net profits, and you can just email me, markzickery@gmail.com. I'll tell you all about it, send you information. We are rocking and rolling. We are up and running. We are shooting. We are posting, doing stuff in post-production. It is just phenomenal. I know you're going to love what we're going to be releasing very, very soon. And, you know, make sure that you subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi. Tell your friends. Make sure they subscribe. Hit the bell. Like us. Comment. All that stuff. You know, it's an amazing universe. So that's it for now. And we will talk again real soon. Bye, guys.